Welcome to stage 2 of the resolution game. This stage is called the problematic character. So, what is a problematic character? Where does it come from? And why is this a problem for you? Let's begin by discussing the concept of what I refer to as the fixed identity. As individuals, we experience the objective world through the eyes of a subjective bias, which means we don't see reality as it actually is. We see reality as we are. We experience life in accordance to our level and depth of life experience, focusing only on the parts of reality that correspond with the perception that we have. Our individual perception is aligned with the guiding values and beliefs of the fixed identity. The fixed identity is the type of person that we identify with and habituate as. The fixed identity with its guiding values and beliefs is what forms a psychological unique filter system, the UFS. The UFS is how we subjectively decode reality as we decode reality through our 5 senses of sight, sound, touch, taste and smell. Our mind body is processing the sensory input of that reality by deleting and distorting that reality to affirm the guiding values and beliefs of our fixed identity, which means that we are making the impersonal reality, which could mean anything, a personal affair. We are colouring the canvas of reality with our values and beliefs. Everybody decodes and experiences reality in relation to the unique guiding values and beliefs of their fixed identity. This means that two people can experience the same objective environment, and yet they are each decoding that environment differently through their unique filter system, where two people can have entirely different experiences of the same reality. In fact, no two minds are alike, nor do they perceive reality the same, which makes you, I, and them one of a kind as individuals. Given that we all interpret reality differently, we could entertain the notion that there are over 7 billion unique versions of us, you and me, that exist within the different minds of all the people worldwide. How you view yourself is even different to how your family members, close friends, and work colleagues perceive you. They have a fixed identity with a personal bias towards you. They view you from the lens of their own personal experiences with you. Likewise, you see them differently to how they see themselves. The fixed identity is why different people have different opinions about the same issues and why people don't always seem eye to eye. It explains why there is so much misunderstanding, confusion and conflict between people. Different folks have different strokes, which is why tolerance and forbearing is needed to live with people that have opposing views. Even so, the stumbling block of a fixed identity is our intolerance to alternative viewpoints and stubbornness with change. That's because we experience cognitive dissonance whenever we receive information that conflicts with the unique filter system within. The fixed identity will adjust the facts of reality to match its way of thinking rather than adjust its thinking to match the facts. The fixed identity therefore has a psychological scotoma. Scotoma means that we have a perceptual blind spot, that we can only perceive reality according to the content of our perception, where we can obfuscate the actual facts of reality to instead perceive reality as we would prefer it to be. Even when the facts of reality are blatant and obvious, the fixed identity will be blind to them. There is a term for this: self-deception. Self-deception is to create a false representation of actual reality and believe it to be true and accurate. And when blindsided with a fixed identity that is self-deceptive, one constantly seeks out experiences and information that matches the false account of reality that they've identified with, whilst ignorant and dismissive of the facts that expose that delusional thinking. When operating against the actual facts of reality, we embark on a painful journey of ill judgment. Ill judgment is what results in the reoccurring problems and mistakes that come from being error prone. And we are liable to error when ignoring the facts of reality. The affirming and blocking of certain experiences and information that we have identified with keeps one locked within a bubble type mentality. We are stuck within the abstract perimeters of the person and reality that we identify with. The bubble mentality is tinted with delusion. We are deluded into thinking that who we are is set in stone, when in fact, who we are is just who we identify with, and there are a myriad of ways to self-identify. We are deluded into believing that the experience of life is only one specific way and could be no other way, when in fact, reality can be perceived and experienced in an infinite amount of ways. That's why the great Buddhist teachers say, no way is the way. Rather than be fixated upon one way of being and doing, we can instead attach and detach to different versions of reality according to what is needed at that specific time and stage of life. So when freed from the self-imposed limitations of a fixed identity, the mind is open and flowing into all possibilities. Why then can we not let go of the reality that we identify with? It's because the fixed identity is so deeply embedded within the psychoneurological fabric of the unconscious aspect that it's difficult to deviate from its guiding values and beliefs. We are continually being reminded, nudged, and directed by its internalized memories and thoughts. Even when attempting to make changes, the fixed identity is always trying to readjust back to its default mode of thinking and seeing things. The fixed identity is so deeply entrenched that even stimulating experiences like visiting different countries and meeting new people does wear thin once the mind readjusts back to its default perception of the fixed identity. If that default perception is mostly pessimistic and problematic, the mind will start to complain about the same old thoughts within a different situation, manifesting the same problems in a new environment. Helpful or harmful, the reality that we experience is always correlating with the guiding values and beliefs of the fixed identity. For better or worse, the fixed identity provides the sense of certainty and security that one needs to operate in this world. People rarely deviate from the certainty and securities of their fixed identity. People like to stick with what they know. People like to maintain results that they are familiar with. People also don't know how to be any different, and they also fear the unknown. Even those of us who suffer pain and conflict in our life struggle to overcome those afflictions because the fixed identity cannot see another way out of the vicious loop. And that's because the individual does not know that they are not the fixed identity that they've identified with. None of us are. We are not the identity itself. We are the conscious awareness that is aware of our identity. Clinging to the limitations of a fixed identity is also risky business within a rapidly changing world. We are blindsided from the disruptions, opportunities, and possibilities that lay beyond the finite version of reality that we perceive and subscribe to. By always sticking to what we've always known, our mindset and skill set is likely to become less valuable, less marketable, less effective, or likely to become redundant in this changing world. It has always been the guiding values and beliefs of your fixed identity that determines where you concentrate your energy and the type of life that you manifest. This also means that you can't self-develop nor upgrade your life conditions to incorporate higher standards of living when you have a fixed identity with sabotaging and abusive traits that are problematic. The fixed identity, therefore, is a major psychological barrier that prevents one from overcoming problems and doing the self-developing work that's required to upgrade your life conditions. Everything that you truly desire to be and have exists outside of the fixed identity. The fixed identity we know is what gives us a sense of this is who I am. Within that fixed identity, we have different characteristic roles for different areas of our life. For example, a man could identify with and adopt the characteristic roles of being a father, a brother, a husband, a doctor, a golfer, etc., where each particular role requires different traits and skills to perform it. The fixed identity also has a mixture of dark and light, or positive and negative characteristics, and since nobody wants to be known as someone negative, people prefer to keep those negative aspects of their character secret. They will repress those unsavory parts out of the conscious awareness. This also means that they will block out and avoid aspects of reality that threaten to expose where one is flawed, lacking, perverse, wrong, false, or unworthy. Yet what is not resolved continues to limit the experience of the person with doubt and conflict. Some people will overtly identify with and proclaim that they have negative characteristics, especially those who are looking for sympathy, therapy, and remedy. And yet, unless those characteristics are resolved, they will still continue to experience and affirm the limitations that they are so overtly proclaiming. But here's the thing. Once we have accepted and concluded that we are the role that we've identified with, through experience we start to build a narrative about the role which affirms and reinforces that role with strong beliefs. We then move away from, defocus, experiences that do not affirm that role and move towards, focus on, experiences that do affirm that role, which is beneficial when the label that we identify with has positive connotations and the role that we play has positive attributes and results. There are so many ways to craft a narrative and play a characteristic role. That's why we have a world of different people with differing views that live distinguishable lifestyles. For example, the characteristic role of an affluent banker that values extravagance and believes that financial wealth is success will perceive and experience reality entirely different to the characteristic role of a down-and-out drug addict that values the next hit and believes there is no hope, the latter being a problematic character. What separates the affluent banker from the drug addict is the way they perceive reality. They focus on and manifest a reality that matches their perception. The perception derives from the guiding values and beliefs of the fixed identity. So, if the drug addict was to upgrade the contents of his or her fixed identity, he or she would soon find themselves upgrading their life conditions. Likewise, if the affluent banker, through various misfortunes, downgraded his fixed identity, he could find himself on the streets. Who you identify with is defining the quality of your life. The problem is when that fixed identity is causing you to perceive reality and behave in a way that is harmful, restrictive, and limiting. The fixed identity is a psychological conditioning that has resulted from a lifetime of experiences that has led you to this point here. If you are to be free from the problematic aspects of your fixed identity and make self-improvements, you must resolve from that which holds you back and pulls you down. Therefore, I have devised a simple 3-step strategy to do just that. Let's begin with step 1 of the strategy, which is to identify with a problematic character. Without realizing it, there are so many ways that we identify with ourselves as having a problematic characteristic trait, which mostly takes place when we are associating with a negative label a narrative that affirms we have a character defect, flaw, limitation, deficiency, or inadequacy. Or when we keep mulling over aspects of who we are, what we've done, and what others say about us as being wrong or bad. The other telltale signs that you have a problematic character as part of your fixed identity is that you have assigned yourself to a derogatory label that has a negative connotation. For example, people can identify with being the addict, the gambler, the black sheep, the loner, the loser, the failure, the nymph, the wimp, the idiot, the monster, the bankruptee, the fatty, the ugly, the divorcee, the gangster, the convict, the trauma victim, the disabled person, the single parent, or the victim of insert blank here. And these are to name but just a few. Now, those aforementioned labels, they could have elements of truth, and they could have negative life experiences that justify them, and yet, whilst you are acting in alignment with those characters and the narratives of those characters, you can never transcend them to better yourself. You see, the more we focus on and give our energy to a perceived problem, the more we start to build a story and identity around that problem. And in doing so, through conditioned reinforcement, through repetition, it becomes this internalized part of who we think we are. That's because when you repeat something enough times, through repetition, it becomes a strong belief. We begin to believe that this is who we permanently are, when it's not. So, within this first step, you are going to explore where you have knowingly or unknowingly identified with a problematic character that's impeding the quality of your life, so that you have a reference of where you need to make a transformational change. And there are 4 distinct ways that we can identify with problematic characteristic traits. We identify with derogatory label. We identify our character with a damaging narrative that concludes we are unworthy, tainted, inferior, powerless, or irredeemable. We value experiences that affirm the negative character that we identify with, and we self-stigmatize and vilify a part of who we are. Now I want you to take a moment out from this program to locate a quiet working space that is free from distractions. So open up a fresh page in your journal and write today's date with the main headline, Identify Problematic Character. Please now take the time to give serious contemplation towards whether or not you do identify with a problematic characteristic, and do not invent a character which does not exist. You are not looking to create problems where there are none. If you do identify with one, two, or more problematic characters, then give them an archetypal name and then move on to step 2. In step 2 is where you will describe the character profile. With this step, you are to produce a written description of the archetype's unique characteristic profile as it relates to your life. And it will help you to review the devious dozen profiles. These will guide you on how to structure a written description. What you're looking to do is create an overview summary of the archetype and describe the different types of beneficial aspects and detrimental aspects that this characteristic, this problematic characteristic trait is having on your life. Once you have described the characteristic profile, once you have written this out, I then want you to move on to step number 3. Step number 3 is where you self-explore this archetype. Very simple to do. I just want you to process each problematic character through the self-exploration exercise that you have already accomplished in stage 1. Using the questions from the self-explorative exercise from stage 1, you can now establish the causations and behavioural patterns of this problematic characteristic trait. So just to recap, this stage 2 of the resolution game is an exercise where you will identify with any problematic characteristic traits, then give them an archetypal name, write out a full written profile for the archetype, and then process it through the self-exploration questions that you've already been through in stage 1. Now again, take your time with this stage. Take however long it takes. What is most important is that after this stage, you have identified with and become self-aware of all of the detrimental characteristics of self. That you have become aware of all of the negative traits and exposed all of the shadow aspects of self, so that you have left no stone unturned, so that you can now go forward to fully resolve yourself. And once you're done with this stage, I will see you on the 3rd stage of the resolution game, where you are going to learn a powerful reconditioning technique called the knack, where you will master how to rewire your psychology. And I'll see you in stage 3.